Hello, Twitter.
Oh my god, I don't fucking care.
Alright. Infamously titled Please Don't Buy Atomic Heart was a video that kicked off a lesser-known debate within the Ukrainian community about the distribution and ethics of, and I quote myself, buying Atomic Heart is indicative of supporting the Russian government's efforts in Ukraine, unquote. Videos Please Buy Atomic Heart and That Atomic Heart video made me sick are separate follow-up videos I will be breaking down alongside the original. Rules follow as such. The video must consider both sides and all factors that play into both. The video must be aware that all factors cannot be found or discovered. In such event, I propose this. Both sides must consider all factors that they can possibly find on both sides. The video cannot be indicative of misinformation. The video must state my lack of expertise in politics and business. In detailing with information such as one regarding claims of pro-Russian stances, support of Russian government, I cannot make conclusive information regarding such stance with discriminatory or subjective information. And lastly, the video will rule in favor of the third side. There are more rule sets you can find in the description not mentioned here. I find it unnecessary to list as it would take too long to do so. Alright. Is buying Atomic Heart indicative of supporting the Russian-Ukrainian war?
On the website of the studio, there is currently no mention of the fact that this is a Russian game dev.
This is true. On their official About Me page, there isn't a mention of the developers being Russian.
At the same time, the studio was mentioned as a Russian one with an office in Moscow in Russian gaming and IT media articles. In 2019, there was even a report from the Moscow office of the studio.
According to the last article he mentioned, I had found the journalist stated, and I quote, DTF's first visit to Mudfish's Moscow office was productive. And I also quote, the studio currently employs about 30 people, while they are distributed between offices in Moscow and another city, end quote.
Means half Cyprus, half Armenian, half Singapore, and whatever the hell else, just to avoid sanctions and negative spotlight.
An article published by Realme Central and written by the RMC team, they explained, and I quote, in fact, Mudfish would have decided to leave Moscow, the country in which the company's offices were located, end quote. Although a motive was never confirmed, it was likely due in part to sanctions.
Let's read out loud together. Guys, we have noted the questions surrounding where we at Mudfish stand. We want to assure you that Mudfish is a developer and studio with a global team focused on an innovative game and is undeniably a pro-peace organization against violence against people. We do not comment on politics or religion. Rest assured, we're a global team focused... Hold on, stop. We do not comment on politics? You're making a game that's sole idea is USSR renewal and communism. You classified your game as inspired by Bioshock and Prey, yet you go the no politics in my video game route? This is one step away from the types of gamers who say, I don't like politics in my video game, and then immediately open up Fallout.
I believe it's important to understand the difference between real-life politics and fictional fabricated ones. Correct. Fictional politics are illustrated works of original politics, but are not necessarily indicative of real-world politics. By this logic, I assume a few things. Even if a company that creates a highly inspired political game, they themselves are not obligated to comment on real-world events. Better yet, just because you made a game with USSR themes, your knowledge on the ongoing war with Ukraine could easily be uninformative, if only basing it on the author's knowledge of their fictional work. There are exceptions, of course, but here I do not believe such one exists. Lastly, in doing such, you would be more likely to maintain your image, and not tanking sales by remaining outside of real-world politics.
Now, let's look at the CEO of Mudfish, whose name is Robert Bagratuni. Except that it isn't. His actual name is Maxim Zatsepin. Max previously had a position of a creative director / top manager in Mail.ru, which is now presented as VK, the biggest social media platform in Russia. It doesn't take much to figure out that a platform that is based in Russia, directed and controlled by Russia, and is used only by Russians will have a strict pro-Russian stance. But it doesn't end there. Meet Yevgenia Sidova. As the founder of Mudfish, she's a former model and an owner of a modeling agency. She worked at New Media Stars, where she was in charge of the computer graphics department. That company is now in charge of various pro-Russian mass media, such as Vzglyad.ru and Dni.ru.
The justification of Max and Shadova being pro-Russian because of their prior involvement with Mail.ru and New Media Stars is flawed. It's merely an assumption that states if a prior management of a likely country-influenced business will harbor those set ideas of a country, in particular in support of the Russian government. It cannot be proven just because a Russian individual decided to make a USSR-style game, only assumed without confirmation from Max and Shadowin themselves.
The investors of the studio are Chinese Tencent and Russian GEM Capital and Gaijin Entertainment. But the most interesting sponsor is GEM Capital. GEM Capital is a Russian fund founded by Anatoly Pali, who previously worked at Gazprom's subsidiary Gazenergoset. The studio raised investments from them in 2021, where Anatoly met and became friends with oligarchs who got rich on oil and gas activities and now have the opportunity to invest large sums of money in various projects. And if you know basic economics and finances, you know that all investments must be returned, including interest. Moreover, a Twitter user found Pali's connection to other Russian state institutions, such as the sanctioned, systematically important bank VTB. If Atomic Heart is being developed with money that originated from sanctioned Russian businesses such as VK and Mail.ru, and banks which are systematically important to Russian governments such as VTB, profits from the game could be directed to help the Russian government in its invasion. Thus, by buying Atomic Heart, you would pay money to companies that support the aggressive policies and military actions of the Russian Federation.
I want to quote this.
If Atomic Heart is being developed with money that originated from sanctioned Russian businesses such as VK and Mail.ru, and banks which are systematically important to Russian governments such as VTB, profits from the game could be directed to help the Russian government in its invasion. Thus, by buying Atomic Heart, you would pay money to companies that support the aggressive policies and military actions of the Russian Federation.
The statement is not only unconfirmational, but also misleading when handling the information provided by FJ Undead. How so? I'll explain by answering questions that cannot be commonly answered. Is the money Anatoly Pali inherited from his previous companies borrowed or owned? If borrowed, is it no longer due to newly established sanctions? If borrowed and due, is it funding Russian military control over Ukraine by upholding shares with companies such as Gazprom, VTB, and Rush.AI? Did Mudfish know of Anatoly Pali's shady history? What is to happen to the unpaid employees of Mudfish if their game is boycotted, and shareholders who are not involved with GEM Capital?
Lastly, there were some incredible terms of service and privacy policies spotted over at Mudfish. The website now leads to a 404, but someone managed to capture these screenshots. Basically, it says that your information can and will be transferred to the Russian government, in particularly the Federal Security Service. And not just your username, but your full name, physical address, email, phone number, IP address, and so on.
If the private policy was true, it was concerning during its existence, and I'm unsure if their investment with Tencent has anything to do with it, or if it still exists. For sure, I can say Steam's private policy guidelines wouldn't allow for such a gathering of users' information. As for other platforms Atomic Heart is on, that I can only hope not. I will link the archive version of the policy in the description.
Finally, let's talk about the game itself for a bit. The game is set in a utopian universe where the USSR had won and had a major boost in technical progress. The game is filled to the brim with USSR-themed keepsakes and memorabilia, from drinking condensed milk straight out of the can to actual flags and symbols of the USSR hammer and sickle. This kind of approach to the showcase of USSR and communism walks a thin line between using it for world building and praising it, and there have been events to prove this. Take a look at this event that people behind VK organized. It was a special showcase of Atomic Heart for the Russian press, which was stylized in the game's Soviet aesthetics, and they did not go stingy on the decorations, huh? The event included a dinner in a large banquet hall where you could see Soviet-style slogans like "Glory to the Soviet engineers" or "Comrade, join the Society of the Future." One of the users in Twitter replies said, "Imagine if developers of Wolfenstein had a Nazi-themed party," and I would say that's well said. Sergei Mohov, a Remedy lead gameplay designer, rightfully accused Mudfish of being nostalgic about the Soviet regime or even glorifying it.
The statement of the USSR winning is actually false and isn't confirmed yet. Just how opinions of the game's glorification of USSR material is hard to confirm without playing through the game and taking in the majority of its story. Although credibly, the Atomic Heart event during VK is hard for me to confirm when it's glorification of USSR material. I'd rather ask someone who's Slavic if they feel it is, and if it even is a problem for it to be held in a public Russian event.
Coming back to Atomic Heart, another point that rubs me the wrong way is the recent marketing strategy. It seems like their marketing team realized that their previous shady strategy has failed to bring in pre-orders, so they went with another plan to make typical capital G gamers buy their game, which is of course none other than through sexualization and objectification of women. So far I have avoided showing these characters on screen, but I am talking about the couple of female USSR-styled robots that they suddenly added in recent trailers and thumbnails to get the attention of the lusty neckbeards, who quickly started to spread rumors about a possible 6-hour sex scene in.
The stereotypical sexualization of women or men in media is a topic I'd rather not debate, but one I will debate is this hypothetical statement. Quote, I'm aware that buying Atomic Heart supports Russian-Ukrainian efforts, but my reasoning for buying a game is because I waited long enough, the game looks good, and robot women. If you care as much to research the products you buy and find where your money is forwarded towards, as in this extreme example of war, and still decide to buy the game with the earlier mentioned reasoning, you're incompetent on understanding the control you have over spendings. If you buy this game without knowing it supports a war, then you are fine. If you buy this game and understand you shouldn't buy it because people are telling you not to, but you don't know why, you can take the risk. Ultimately, you're not the one to blame for not being able to find out why. Problem is that the main argument we know isn't confirmed, and if that main argument helps Russia winning over Ukraine.
In conclusion, what can you do to support Ukraine on this matter? If you did purchase a pre-order of Atomic Heart, the first and the best step would be to cancel it, request a refund, and send that exact amount of money to Ukrainian charities. If you want to go a step further, you can do the following. You can go to the game's shop page, click on the complaint flag, select the item breach of the law, contains materials that violate the laws of your country, and write a similar text or something on that matter.
What you shouldn't do is boycott this game with unconfirmed or misleading information. And if you care about Ukraine, support them either way outside the use of this game's mention. Next, we have one of the first to debunk our previous Don't Buy Atomic Heart video. That goes more into the actual history of Atomic Heart and deconfirms the legitimacy of earlier mentioned information.
The thing is, there is absolutely no clear data, no clear confirmation of anything at all that Atomic Heart is involved with anything of Russian authorities or how it's supporting the Russian attacks. This is based off the fact that first, Atomic Heart's many founding companies, including Xbox and Focus Entertainment, contains one in particular called Viki Play, who's reportedly connected with the Russian government, and also that a Russian-based journalist company somewhere in Russia made the claims that Atomic Heart is collecting data of people and sending them to authorities. With this in mind, in the video it says if you support Atomic Heart, hence supporting VK Play, who is reportedly connected with the government and its banks, you indirectly support the Russian invasion. Again, there is absolutely no proof of any of this and how Atomic Heart, a video game, is sponsoring a Russian invasion.
If I'm not mistaken, VK Play is a publisher that would be selling Atomic Heart in Russia. It's hard for me to say if the sum of their agreement was paid before the publication of Atomic Heart or if it will be after the publication. And if it is after the publication, the money that is earned by sales of Atomic Heart being forwarded towards the Russian-Ukrainian war is a claim that VQ Play is entirely owned by the Russian government, not a confirmation. The collection of data was possible given the now archived 404 private policy paper. I'm also unaware where that information could have been sent as I did not read all of this. That was a little bit of a shorter section, and to be clear, from here on out it will likely not be as large as the original video. Next we have, that Atomic Heart video made me sick.
As for me, I want to touch on something I'm really concerned that no one is talking about, and that is the innocent Russian people who have been affected by this conflict as well, not to mention this potential boycott of this video game. Look, I'm an American, and I'm just a late 20s video game channel, so it's not really my place to comment on the geopolitical implications and consequences of that conflict. But I'll tell you what I can comment on, and that's the millions of innocent Russians who are being drenched in hatred for something that they had nothing to do with.
I'm sure there have been acts of discriminatory and biased objectifications of Russians during this, but I don't believe this game will actually be boycotted or affect the lives of the Russian people.
The actions of the Russian government, much like the American government and pretty much any other kind of government, don't typically reflect the desires of their people. Moreover, the developers of that game are a coalition of passionate men and women grinding themselves down to create something interesting and fun for people to play. The fact that they're based out of Russia does not implicate them in anything to do with this Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Okay, dude, what the f? Yeah, I agree.
What I am saying is that the Russian people are also struggling too right now due to the massive embargoes put on them from the other governments of the world. And I know this personally because one of my best friends goes by due to the embargo set on Russia. He had to turn over access of his streaming distribution to me so I could withdraw it and send it to him in Bitcoin. Because the man has a son and he works himself to the bone as a tattoo artist, and one of his biggest streams of income was blocked from him due to the embargoes. He's not political in any way, shape, or form. He's just a father and an artist. How would you feel if one day your bank just turned off your debit card because of something Trump or Biden or whatever just decided to do, even if you don't agree with it? I'm willing to bet that you'd think that was pretty unfair.
Seriously, I'm not an expert on commerce, but I don't believe sanctions will disable your debit or credit card, but rather cancel any transactions or withdrawals made outside that sanctioned country.
Do or don't bring politics in your games. I don't really care. But in this instance, they're blaming and attacking developers for something that they have nothing to do with. What I'm trying to say is that punishing innocent, hard-working game developers for their government's actions is the equivalent to refusing to tip a waitress because she has a Russian accent.
For sure, they shouldn't be punished because of their government's likelihood and investment. But comparing the financial support of a war to the discriminatory act of denying a tip to a Russian waitress is flawed. The stakes are enormously different. And I also want to state to anyone watching, if you're basing this information off the likelihood that these devs are pro-Russian and have meticulously planned for all this to happen to support their government, you don't give enough credit to the difference a government and people share. Okay, I want to look at some Twitter responses now. I'll do my best to stay subjectively sound, as reading anything on Twitter will most likely result in a herniated disc alongside a ruptured spleen. I'm keeping that in. Quote, "The game itself is literally about real-world politics, made with money from the real-world Russian gas company, and bank financing a real-world war and genocide, released on a platform owned by the real-world Russian government, sanctioned for its real-world actions." Unquote. The game illustrates real-world politics. To say it's about fictional politics will be found out after the full story release. To clarify, I mean to say the story could be about a guy running through an open world destroying robots than anything political about destroying those robots. If investment money from Gazprom was used to fund Mudfish, what about it? Can you confirm that is indeed Gazprom money? Can you confirm that that money is borrowed or owned? Can you confirm that it creates a problem as large as benefiting Russian-Ukrainian invasion? Can you prove Mudfish was aware it was? Can you prove the connection BTB has to Russian military finances? Can you prove BTB was money that was borrowed or owned? Can you prove that Mudfish was aware of this? So far, throughout the entire video, the word sanction I found to be used misleadingly, as if Mudfish themselves had been the main leader in avoiding them, and the ones at fault for avoiding them. Simply moving out of Russia to avoid sanctions is more than a fair motive. The only time it hasn't been was when the founder of GEM Capital avoided them while still taking shares outside and inside Russia. That is not Mudfish's accountability. That's supposed to be funny, I guess. You know, I wonder what my original opinion on this, conflict was.
And continuous lapse in my judgment.
Yeah? I'm off of Twitter now.